As the manor continues to exist in your thoughts, it begins to change shape. Not physically, not in a way you could point at or describe clearly, but in the way memories change when you think about them too often. Corridors feel longer than before. Corners appear sharper. The house seems to expand inward, not outward, like it is creating more space for what it holds rather than what it shows. Victorian homes were not designed for comfort the way we define it today. They were designed for structure, hierarchy, and control. Every room had a purpose, and every person inside had a role. The manor absorbed this philosophy completely. It learned that stillness meant obedience and silence meant safety. Over decades, it rewarded quiet and punished expression, not through action, but through atmosphere. People who once lived here learned how to disappear while standing in plain sight. They learned how to smile without joy, how to speak without meaning, how to exist without leaving a mark. The house watched this happen again and again until it no longer remembered life any other way. That is why laughter feels wrong inside the manor. Even imagined laughter feels out of place, like a sound that does not belong to the air. The walls seem to reject it, not angrily, but awkwardly, like a language they no longer understand. Joy feels foreign here, not forbidden, just unfamiliar. Somewhere deep within the structure of the manor is a memory of warmth. Not happiness, not love, but warmth. A fireplace burning steadily, a quiet evening where nothing terrible happened. This memory is faint, almost erased, but it exists, and it is the reason the house never fully collapses into darkness. It remembers that calm once lived here. Victorian society believed suffering was noble, endurance was admired, to complain was to fail. The manor internalized this belief. It does not cry out, it does not scream, it suffers quietly, with dignity. And that makes it far more unsettling than any screaming ghost ever could be. As hours pass inside the manor, your awareness becomes sharper. You notice details you would normally ignore. The way shadows linger too long, the way silence has layers, the way your own breathing feels louder than it should. This heightened awareness is not accidental. The house sharpens attention because attention feeds memory. Memory is the true haunting here. The manor is not filled with spirits trapped by unfinished business. It is filled with moments trapped by restraint. A hand that wanted to reach out but didn't. A truth that wanted to surface but remained buried. A choice delayed until it was no longer possible. These moments did not die. They stagnated. That stagnation has weight. People often describe feeling a pressure in their chest while inside old Victorian homes. They assume it is fear, but it is closer to inherited restraint, the body reacting to centuries of suppressed emotion embedded in space. The manor does not chase, it does not whisper names, it does not move objects to frighten visitors. It waits. Waiting is its strongest skill. It knows that if you remain long enough, you will begin to supply the fear yourself. At some point, every visitor experiences the same subtle shift. They stop wondering what happened here and start wondering who they would have been if they had lived here. This is when the manor feels closest, when imagination bridges the gap between past and present. You imagine waking up under rules you did not choose, wearing clothes that restrict movement, living a life measured by appearance rather than fulfillment. You imagine years passing quietly, too quietly, and suddenly the manor does not feel haunted. It feels explanatory. Victorian architecture favored symmetry, order, repetition. These elements calm the eye but confine the spirit. The manor uses this design to keep emotions aligned, controlled, contained. Nothing spills, nothing escapes. Even death was controlled here, mourned quietly, properly, briefly. Grief was not allowed to linger publicly, so it lingered privately. It's soaked into the furniture, the floors, the stair rails polished by generations of restrained hands. The house remembers touch more than faces, the way people leaned against walls when no one was watching, the way fingers trembled on door handles before entering rooms where honesty was dangerous. These small gestures repeat themselves in the air long after bodies are gone. This is why visitors sometimes feel as though they are repeating movements unconsciously, standing in certain places, pausing at certain thresholds. The house is guiding them gently through patterns it remembers well. Night does not make the manor scarier, it makes it more honest. Without daylight to distract the eye, the emotional structure becomes clearer. You feel the weight of years without needing to see anything strange. Some people leave the manor feeling watched, others leave feeling understood. Both reactions are correct. The house watches because it understands, and understands because it has watched for too long. The Victorian era ended, but the mindset did not vanish. It simply changed clothes, changed language, changed location. The manor recognizes modern visitors not as strangers, but as variations of the same human struggle. Different century, same restraint. That is why the manor feels timeless, not because it exists outside time, but because it reflects something persistent in human nature, the fear of disobedience, the comfort of routine, the quiet terror of living a life designed by others. As the final moments inside the manor stretch on, you realize the most chilling truth of all. The house does not trap people inside it. People carry it with them when they leave. They bring its stillness into their homes, its silence into their conversations, its restraint into their choices. And sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet, they feel that familiar pressure return. Not as fear, as recognition. Because the haunted manor of the Victorian era is not a place frozen in history. It is a mirror. And once you have seen yourself reflected in its silence, you never fully forget the feeling of standing inside it. Over time, the manor begins to feel less like a structure and more like a state of mind. You realize that what unsettles you is not the idea of something happening, but the certainty that something already happened and never fully ended. The house exists in the aftermath of its own history, permanently suspended in the moment just after emotion was silenced. Victorian life demanded endurance above all else. People were taught that strength meant stillness, that survival meant silence. The manor absorbed this lesson deeply. It does not react to pain because pain was never allowed to be expressed here. It does not respond to fear because fear was expected, not questioned. As you imagine standing in the center of the manor, there is a sense that every wall is layered, not layered with paint or wallpaper, but with versions of reality stacked on top of each other. Each generation walked the same paths, slept in the same rooms, carried different worries but buried them in identical ways. The repetition carved grooves into the space itself. This is why the house feels predictable and unsettling at the same time. Nothing surprises you, yet nothing comforts you. You always know what comes next, and you always wish something else would happen. Victorian children grew up learning restraint before they learned joy. Their voices were lowered early, their movements corrected constantly. The manor remembers the echo of footsteps that were taught to be quiet, even when no one was listening. It remembers doors closed gently, not out of kindness, but out of fear of being noticed. These habits became rituals. Rituals became atmosphere. The manor learned how humans disappear emotionally long before they disappear physically. It watched people fade while still breathing. It witnessed lives shrink into routines so tight they left no room for rebellion. Over time, the house stopped expecting change. Change feels offensive here. That is why modern minds feel uneasy inside it. We are not used to environments that do not adapt to us. The manor does not adjust. It waits for you to adjust instead, and many do without realizing it. Your posture shifts, your tone lowers, your thoughts slow. You become quieter, not because you are afraid, but because the space expects it. This is the most dangerous kind of influence, the kind that feels natural. The manor does not haunt with images, it haunts with expectations. Somewhere in its long existence, the house learned that humans are most vulnerable when they believe they are behaving correctly. That is when they stop questioning. That is when they surrender parts of themselves willingly. Victorian morality prized appearances over truth. As long as something looked proper, it was allowed to rot beneath the surface. The manor perfected this illusion. It looks stable. It looks dignified. It looks calm. But beneath that calm is centuries of unspoken tension. This tension vibrates faintly, like a sound just below hearing. You do not hear it, but your body reacts. Your muscles tighten. Your breath shortens. You feel watched, not by eyes, but by standards. The house enforces standards that no longer exist, yet still feel familiar. That is why they are powerful. They are outdated, but not obsolete. As you remain within the influence of the manor, you begin to feel something unsettlingly intimate. The house seems to recognize parts of you that you rarely show. Your compliance, your hesitation, your habit of staying quiet to avoid conflict. These traits are not learned here, but they resonate here. The manor amplifies what already exists. It does not plant fear, it cultivates it. Many who leave the manor describe dreams afterward, dreams where they are walking through long corridors without destination, dreams where doors lead to rooms they have already seen, dreams where time stretches endlessly but nothing changes. These dreams are not supernatural messages, they are reflections. The manor leaves an imprint because it mirrors a mental state many people live in without realizing it. A life of waiting, waiting for permission, waiting for the right time, waiting for approval that never comes. Victorian lives were measured by endurance, not fulfillment. The manor still measures visitors the same way. How long can you stay? How quiet can you become? How much of yourself can you suppress without breaking? Those who feel most disturbed by the manor are often those who already feel trapped in invisible expectations. The house does not create the cage, it reveals it. As centuries passed, the manor outlived the values that created it, but it did not forget them. It preserved them like a fossilized mindset. Anyone who enters steps into that preserved pressure. The air feels thick not because of age, but because of accumulation. Every unspoken thought added density. Every swallowed emotion added weight. The house grew heavier without growing louder. And this is where the true haunting lives, not in ghosts seeking revenge, but in silence seeking acknowledgement. The manor does not want you to scare you away. It wants you to stay long enough to feel what was never allowed to be felt, to understand what it means to exist without expression, to live without release. As the realization deepens, something uncomfortable emerges, a sense that the manor is not cruel, it is obedient. It did exactly what it was built to do. It protected order, it preserved control, it maintained silence. The tragedy is not that it succeeded. The tragedy is that humans needed it to. By the time you step away from the manor in your mind, the unease lingers, not sharply, gently, like a hand resting on your shoulder long after the touch should have ended. You feel slower, more reflective, slightly disconnected from urgency. And in that moment, the manor has done what it always does. It has made you pause, not to frighten you,
but to make you feel the weight of a life unlived.
As the presence of the manor settles deeper into your awareness, you begin to understand that it does not exist to frighten, but to preserve. It preserves patterns the way museums preserve artifacts, except these artifacts are emotional habits. The way people learned to endure quietly, the way they learned to accept instead of resist, the way they learned to live carefully, so carefully that life itself became something to tiptoe around. The manor never learned how to let go, because letting go was never practiced here. Everything was held tightly: reputation, appearances, control. Even love was regulated, filtered through expectation and propriety. The house absorbed this tension until it became structural, until it became part of how the space itself breathes. If you imagine standing still long enough, you can feel it. Not a presence beside you, but a pressure around you, as if the air itself is trained not to move freely. You become aware of how much noise you normally make, even in your own mind, and slowly that noise fades. This is when the manor feels closest to complete. Victorian people were surrounded by rules they did not write: social rules, moral rules, gender rules, rules about grief, joy, desire, ambition. The manor was the physical stage where these rules played out every day. Over time, it learned that rules do not need enforcers forever. Eventually, people enforce them on themselves. That lesson never left the walls. You may notice that the longer you imagine the manor, the less you think about ghosts. The idea feels childish here, too simple. This place does not deal in spectacle. It deals in persistence, in quiet erosion, in the slow reshaping of human behavior. The manor does not scream because it was never allowed to. It does not rage because rage was improper. It does not beg because begging was shameful. Instead, it waits, and waiting, when practiced long enough, becomes power. Somewhere in its history, the house stopped expecting happiness. It began to value stability instead. Stability at any cost, even the cost of the people inside it. And not belief became embedded so deeply that it still radiates outward, influencing anyone who steps close enough to listen. People often mistake this feeling for depression or fear or dread, but it is something older, something colder. It is the sensation of being reduced to a role. Inside the manor, you are not a person, you are a presence, something that occupies space quietly, something that should not disturb the order of things. This is why people feel watched even when they know no one is there. They are not being observed, they are being evaluated by an invisible standard that once governed every life inside of these walls. And standards are far more terrifying than spirits. As the hours stretch on, you begin to feel time not as movement, but as weight. Each second presses down gently but insistently. You are not pushed forward, you are held in place. The manor does not hurry you. It does not allow you to hurry either. This sensation is deeply uncomfortable for modern minds. We are built for distraction, for speed, for escape. The manor offers none of these. It removes escape not by locking doors, but by removing urgency. Without urgency, you are left with yourself. That is when the true haunting begins. Thoughts you normally avoid rise slowly to the surface. Questions you postpone begin to linger. Regrets take shape. Doubts gain clarity. The manor does not cause these thoughts. It simply creates a space where they cannot be drowned out. Victorian people lived entire lives without acknowledging these thoughts. The manor learned from them. It learned how to hold discomfort indefinitely. That is its greatest skill.
If you listen closely, you may feel as though the house is asking something of you, not out loud, not directly. It asks you to slow down enough to notice what you carry, to feel the weight of restraint that still exists in your own life, to recognize how much of yourself you silence to fit into the world around you. This is not accusation, it is recognition. The manor does not judge, it understands, because it was built by people who believed that suffering quietly was the highest form of virtue. And not belief never died, it just stopped being spoken. As you imagine leaving the manor again and again, you realize something unsettling. Leaving does not feel like escape, it feels like interruption, like stepping out of a deep conversation before it is finished. The house does not chase you because it knows something you do not want to admit. You will carry it with you. Not as fear, not as nightmares, but as awareness. You will notice silence differently, stillness differently, expectations differently. You will sense when rooms feel heavy, when conversations feel restrained, when lives feel carefully constructed instead of genuinely lived. And in those moments, the manor will feel close again. Not because it followed you, but because it showed you something that was already there. The haunted manor of the Victorian era is not a place that traps souls. It is a place that reveals how easily souls can trap themselves. That is why it endures. That is why it does not fade. That is why, even now, long after the era that built it has ended, its influence still breathes quietly through anyone willing to listen long enough. And perhaps the most chilling truth of all is this. If the manor were truly empty, if its lessons had truly died, then none of this would feel familiar. But it does, and that familiarity is the echo that never leaves. As the idea of the manor settles further into the mind, something strange begins to happen. The house no longer feels separate from the listener. It feels closer, almost internal, as if parts of it exist not in stone and wood, but in memory and habit. You begin to realize that places like this do not survive because they are feared. They survive because they are understood too late. The manor does not announce itself as dangerous. It feels respectable, stable, proper. And that is how it invites people in. Victorian society trusted what looked composed. Disorder was obvious, chaos could be identified, but quiet control was admired. The manor mastered that illusion so well that even now it feels safe on the surface. And safety, when it demands silence, becomes a slow kind of harm. Inside the manor, the past does not replay like a story. It presses like a mood, a constant emotional weather that never changes. You are not meant to see history here. You are meant to feel it, the way one feels humidity before rain or pressure before a storm that never breaks. Victorian lives were shaped by inevitability. Birth determined destiny. Class determined worth, gender determined freedom. The manor absorbed these rules until it no longer questioned them. It does not understand rebellion, it understands endurance. That is why the house feels calm even when it feels wrong. The calm is trained. Imagine generations of people waking every day, knowing exactly what was expected of them, and knowing that deviation would cost them everything. Imagine learning from childhood how to hide disappointment behind politeness, how to convert anger into obedience, how to bury longing under routine. The manor watched this happen quietly, patiently, endlessly. It did not interfere. It learned. Over time, the house became a container for unrealized lives. Not tragic in the dramatic sense, tragic in the ordinary sense. Lives that could have been different but never were. Choices postponed until choice itself disappeared. Dreams quietly dismissed as impractical, improper, unrealistic. These dreams did not vanish, they lingered. They settled into corners, into stairwells, into the spaces between rooms where no one ever stopped long enough to feel anything. The manor became full of potential that never matured, like fruit left to rot unpicked. This is why the house feels heavy but empty at the same time, full of something but nothing tangible. You feel the absence of fulfillment more strongly than the presence of pain. And absence is harder to escape. As you remain with the thought of the manor, you may feel a subtle discomfort growing, not fear, but exposure, the sense that something inside you is being gently uncovered. The house does not force this, it simply creates conditions where distraction fails. Victorian homes were places of performance. You performed respectability, you performed morality, you performed happiness. Behind closed doors, the performance continued because there was no audience for honesty. The manor remembers the exhaustion of constant performance. It remembers how people forgot who they were beneath the roles they played. Over time, the roles became identities, and identity became obligation. That obligation still lingers. That is why the house feels calm even when it feels wrong. The calm is trained. When you think about leaving the manor again, you realize that the most unsettling part is not what it contains, but what it reflects. It reflects how easily humans adapt to constraint, how quickly we accept limitation when it is framed as normal, how naturally we silence ourselves to maintain order. The manor is not a villain, it is a witness, and witnesses remember. That is why, even after imagining stepping away, the sensation does not disappear. The calm follows you. The stillness lingers. You notice how loud the world feels afterwards, how rushed, how unfinished. And you understand with a quiet discomfort why some people long to return to places like this. Because stillness can feel like relief, even when it costs you something. The haunted manor of the Victorian era does not ask to be believed in, it asks to be recognized. It exists wherever lives are shaped by expectation instead of desire, wherever silence is rewarded more than honesty, wherever endurance is mistaken for strength. And once you recognize it, you cannot unrecognize it. That is its true haunting. Time inside the manor is strange. It does not move in minutes or hours. It moves in layers. You step into one room and the past lingers there like a shadow that refuses to leave. You move to another and decades of waiting seem to press down on your shoulders. The house does not hurry you, and the lack of urgency unsettles the mind. It is a quiet pressure, the kind that seeps into your thoughts, slowing them, stretching them until even imagination feels patient. The house has learned how to exist without the chaos of life, and it invites you, gently, to do the same. The walls remember hands that rested on them in despair, and footsteps that passed silently in fear. They remember whispers, half-formed apologies, and tears swallowed behind polite expressions. Every inch of the manor holds repetition, the kind that does not repeat events, but emotional states. You feel it instinctively, the slow, meticulous layering of human restraint, the way people learned to control themselves so carefully that they almost forgot how to breathe freely. Victorian homes were built for appearances, and this one perfected the art. The rooms were designed to impress visitors with order, symmetry, and grandeur, yet behind the facade, the private spaces contained the chaos of suppressed lives. Children who were not allowed to cry, women who were not allowed to speak, servants who were not allowed to rest. They all left traces of their endurance. You can feel it, subtle and faint but insistent, a weight that grows heavier the longer you imagine it. The house does not haunt in a conventional sense. There are no abrupt noises or sudden shadows. There is no shouting, no banging doors, no gaping figures. The haunting comes in a softer form, the sense that you are moving through someone else's life without their permission, and yet they do not notice you. The house folds you into its patterns, inviting your mind to match its pace. You begin to walk slower, think slower, breathe slower, until the line between you and the manor blurs. It is here that the manor's true influence is revealed. It does not seek to frighten or to dominate. It seeks to reflect, to make visitors see what they already carry within themselves: habits, fears, compromises, and silences. You are not haunted by spirits. You are haunted by echoes of life you have yet to fully examine. The manor teaches patience, endurance, and the subtle terror of existing quietly, unexamined, unnoticed. Each room has a memory, a forgotten meal, a reprimand whispered too quietly, a lullaby sung in exhaustion. Over centuries, these memories have embedded themselves in the walls, carpets, and ceilings. They are not static. They do not rest. They shift slightly with every visitor who enters, reaching toward recognition. You feel it as unease, as introspection, as a curious weight that sits behind your sternum. You feel the house looking at you in silence, and you respond instinctively by keeping still, by quieting your thoughts. The house has learned from generations of humans how to shape behavior without effort. It waits, and the waiting is patient and long. It knows that urgency is temporary, but habits are enduring. Visitors quickly discover that while their bodies are free to move, their minds are subtly guided. They slow down, unconsciously adopting the pacing of lives that were lived under constant observation. The house is teaching, without words. Every shadow, every echo, every temperature change, every floorboard creak carries subtle instruction. You may notice that you begin to reflect in ways you have not before. You notice regrets that were once easy to ignore, thoughts about what could have been, decisions you postponed, words you withheld. The house does not ask for confession. It simply provides silence deep enough that these thoughts surface, and when they do, you feel simultaneously exposed and comforted. Exposed because your inner life is raw and unspoken, comforted because the house has carried similar burdens for centuries. Victorian life was about endurance, and endurance is the essence of the manor. The house does not punish, it does not enforce morality, it preserves it. It is an emotional archive, capturing the unspoken, the suppressed, the hidden, and the more you dwell in it, the more you become aware of your own patterns, your own silences, and your own small compromises. Time stretches here. Minutes become hours. Hours feel like seconds. You cannot measure the day as you normally would. You begin to lose urgency, not because the world outside has changed, but because the manor's patience has reshaped your sense of time. It is neither threatening nor cruel. It is simply constant, and constant endurance is more disorienting than chaos ever could be. As the mind adapts, you may begin to dream within waking. The hallways extend beyond logic. Doors lead back to places you never expected. Footsteps echo when none are present. Shadows lean in familiar ways, and silence feels as heavy as furniture. Your thoughts loop, quietly at first, then insistently. You realize that the house does not trap your body, it traps your attention, and that is far more enduring. Long after leaving, the manor follows quietly. It lives in your pauses, your reflective moments, in the way you notice silence and emptiness in your own home. You carry a fraction of its patience, a fraction of its weight, and the echoes of human restraint seep into your perception. Even now, when you recall the house, your breathing slows, your mind quiets, and you feel the subtle weight of generations pressing gently into your consciousness. This is why the haunted manor is not terrifying in the way popular stories promise. It is not screaming, it is observing. It is not attacking, it is remembering. And what it remembers is not your past, but your present self as part of a lineage of people who quietly obeyed, who quietly endured, who quietly silenced themselves to fit into the order of life. Even centuries after the last Victorian inhabitant left, the house maintains its lessons. It has learned the rhythm of patience, the cadence of restraint, the art of subtle influence. Visitors often feel that something is guiding them, and in a sense it is. The house is not aware in the human sense. It does not think, it does not feel, but it has internalized patterns of human behavior so completely that it shapes the experience of anyone who enters. In long silence, you may begin to wonder if you were ever truly separate from the manor. Its corridors are in your mind now. Its quiet influence resides in your habits. Its patient endurance is reflected in the way you withhold thoughts, the way you suppress desire, the way you maintain calm even when your mind is restless. And the realization that part of the house lives inside you is profoundly disquieting.
The manor's influence does not end when the body leaves. It lingers in the mind, subtle at first, then insistently, like a rhythm that refuses to be ignored. You notice how silence feels different afterward, how space feels heavier, how your own reflection in mirrors seems quieter than before. It is not that the house follows you. It is that the house has found a way to fold into the pattern of thought that you carry with you wherever you go. There is a strange intimacy to this lingering. You are no longer simply an observer. You are partially observed, partially measured, partially remembered. It does not matter that the house has no eyes or ears in the traditional sense. Its memory is embedded in everything that moves through it. The floors that have been polished by generations of careful hands, the railings worn smooth by restrained grips, the air thickened by decades of whispered apologies and stifled sighs. The longer you allow your imagination to dwell in the manor, the more the boundaries blur. The hallways stretch endlessly in memory. Doors appear where no doors physically exist. Staircases fold back upon themselves in impossible ways. You may feel you have walked the same corridor more times than is logically possible, and yet you never fully feel the repetition until you pause long enough to sense the subtle changes. The shadow in a corner, the faint creak that seems to carry the weight of centuries. This is the genius of the manor's influence. It does not demand attention. It simply exists as a constant, and human awareness bends to it. You find yourself anticipating sounds that never occur, expecting footsteps that never arrive, feeling eyes upon you that have no origin, and in doing so, you begin to mirror the lives it has preserved, cautious, measured, aware of every movement, every word, every gesture. Victorian life was built upon the suppression of excess and the careful control of emotion. The manor internalized these values to perfection. It is patient, as only something that has witnessed centuries of careful endurance can be. It is observant,
as only something that has absorbed generations of unspoken rules can be. And it is constant, as only stone and wood and memory combined over centuries can remain. You may notice as you continue to inhabit this imagined space that your own habits begin to change. You pause before speaking, even aloud. You notice details in your surroundings that previously escaped you. You sense the rhythm of time differently, as if life outside the manor has accelerated while you remain immersed in its measured pacing. And this is the subtle horror. The house does not need to raise its voice or shift its walls to leave an impression. Its presence is already woven into the way you think. Some visitors report dreams after experiencing the manor in imagination, dreams that extend the house infinitely, corridors that fold back upon themselves, staircases that climb into darkness but never reach a floor. Rooms appear that you have never seen, and yet they feel familiar, as though your own suppressed memories have shaped them. These dreams are not supernatural, they are the mind's reflection of prolonged exposure to a space that rewards patience, endurance, and quiet observation. The manor also manipulates emotions subtly. Joy feels foreign, anger feels unsafe, sadness feels familiar. Even in your imagination, you begin to notice how readily you adopt the manor's emotional cadence, a slow, careful, self-contained rhythm. This is the essence of its haunting, not the spectacle of terror, but the quiet imprint of behavior, the shaping of thought, the reflection of centuries of human suppression. Each generation that lived in the manor reinforced its power. Children learned silence before they learned speech. Women learned obedience before desire. Men learned restraint before passion. Over time, these lessons were embedded in the structure itself, woven into the walls, the floors, the very air. And those who visit today, whether in memory, imagination, or presence, absorb the lessons as if they were part of their own lives. Time inside the manor is elastic. Minutes can stretch endlessly, and hours can vanish in a blink. There is no urgency. There is only presence and the slow unfolding of awareness. You feel a strange pressure as a result, not physical, but emotional and mental. It is the sensation of being guided without guidance, measured without judgment, and observed without interruption. The house does not command, it suggests, and you comply naturally. As you dwell deeper, you may begin to notice shadows that are not shadows, sounds that are not sounds, and silences that speak. The house has learned how to communicate without words. It speaks in absence, in expectation, in the weight of human restraint. You sense the lives it has contained, the suppressed laughter, the withheld tears, the restrained anger, the careful obedience. Each is preserved in the very structure of the building, waiting quietly for recognition. Visitors sometimes find themselves moving through imagined rooms they have never seen, performing the same careful routines that the manor has preserved, standing quietly, pausing before speaking, adjusting posture without reason. You may wonder if you are being influenced or if you are merely echoing something that has always been part of you. And the answer is both. The manor does not force you to behave. It mirrors what already exists, amplifies it, and reflects it back in ways that are almost imperceptible, yet profoundly real. The house's power is cumulative. Each moment spent inside adds weight. Each minute of careful observation strengthens its subtle imprint, and the longer you linger, the more your own awareness begins to mirror the pace, restraint, and patience that the manor has perfected over centuries. You are no longer merely visiting. You are becoming part of the continuum it has maintained since the Victorian era. Even after leaving, the influence endures. You notice pauses in conversation that feel longer than usual. Silence feels heavier.
Space feels more substantial. Your own thoughts, usually hurried and scattered, begin to slow. This is the house following you, not physically, but psychologically. Its lessons have been absorbed, and now they continue to operate quietly in your mind. And as the mind continues to dwell on the manor, another layer of understanding emerges. You realize that what you are experiencing is not fear of ghosts or supernatural events. The true haunting is existential. It is the awareness of human endurance, the recognition of suppressed desire, the reflection of lives constrained by expectation. The manor is timeless because these patterns are timeless. They exist wherever humans have learned to quiet themselves to fit into the world. This is why the manor is more terrifying than any traditional haunted house. It does not scream, it does not chase, it does not demand attention. It simply mirrors human restraint and patience, allowing you to recognize it within yourself. And the recognition is slow, almost imperceptible, until you realize that part of the house now exists inside your own mind. The haunted manor of the Victorian era, then, is not merely a place, it is a state of consciousness, a reflection of human endurance, patience, and self-suppression. It teaches quietly, observing the unobserved, preserving the unspoken, and once experienced, it cannot be unexperienced. Its rhythm enters your own, its silence merges with yours, its weight follows you, even after you leave.
Time, inside the manor, has a peculiar quality. It does not rush, it does not drag. It stretches and folds like a ribbon in slow motion, and you find yourself moving along with it, unconsciously adjusting your own pace to match the house's rhythm. Every footstep echoes faintly, not in sound, but in sensation, as though the house is measuring you, testing your patience, watching to see how long you can remain quiet before your mind wanders. You do not resist, because resistance feels unnecessary here. Resistance feels rude, almost disrespectful. The house is old, older than most of its visitors can truly comprehend. Its age is not simply in years, but in the accumulation of countless human lives. Each generation that lived within its walls added to the invisible weight. Children born in the manor learned silence before speech, patience before play, observation before curiosity. They grew up learning that restraint was virtue, that expression was dangerous, that the world outside demanded obedience, and the manor absorbed these lessons as though it were absorbing air. Walking through the imagined corridors, you begin to sense the subtle differences between rooms. Some are warmer, their memories of laughter faint but persistent, as though they long for release. Some are colder, thick with tension and regret, carrying the compressed sighs of lives that never had the chance to speak. And some rooms feel impossibly still, so silent that you feel your own thoughts loud in comparison. It is here, in these silent chambers, that the true haunting exists, not in ghostly figures, not in moving objects, but in the weight of what was never expressed. The house does not need to speak. Its lessons are carried through subtle pressures, faint temperature shifts, and the echo of centuries of careful movement. Doors opened softly, curtains moved gently, footsteps measured. These are not random. They are the residue of lives lived under scrutiny, under expectation, under the suffocating rhythm of propriety. The manor remembers every careful pause, every whispered apology, every withheld sigh, and these memories have hardened into the very structure of the building. You begin to notice changes within yourself. Your posture becomes slightly more cautious, your breathing slower, your thoughts more deliberate. This is not fear, this is mimicry. The manor does not demand obedience, but you adopt its cadence instinctively. You have absorbed the rhythm of restraint because it resonates with something already present inside you. the part of you that conforms, that hesitates, that silences itself in order to maintain order. Time feels elastic here. Minutes stretch into what feels like hours. Hours compress into moments. You lose the sense of progression, and with it, the sense of control. This is deliberate. The house does not need to manipulate with noise or spectacle. It shapes perception itself, and perception, once bent, is far more enduring than fear. The manor teaches slowly, by example, by resonance, by the cumulative weight of centuries of unspoken lessons. The walls themselves seem to breathe, not physically, but emotionally. They inhale restraint, exhale expectation. They are patient, infinitely patient, and patience is the true measure of the house's power. Centuries of quiet observation have allowed it to perfect the art of influence. You are not manipulated, you are guided. You are not frightened, you are reminded. And the reminder is subtle, almost invisible, but it seeps into every thought, every pause, every suppressed desire. There is no dramatic haunting here, no shouting, no visible specters, no sudden terrors. The haunting is of a different order. It is the haunting of self-awareness, of reflection, of the realization that your own restraint, your own self-suppression resonates perfectly with the centuries-old structure. The house does not create fear. It magnifies what is already present in the human mind. As you continue to dwell within the manor's presence, your imagination begins to stretch the space further. Hallways extend beyond what seems physically possible. Rooms appear that you have never seen, and yet feel familiar, as though drawn from some memory you have not consciously accessed. The staircase folds in on itself, leading to floors that cannot exist, yet somehow do. The house becomes infinite, not in size, but in the depth of its psychological space. Visitors, real and imagined, carry patterns into the manor. Each adds layers to its influence. Every thought, every suppressed sigh, every quiet endurance becomes part of the building's history, and the house responds in kind, absorbing, recording, reflecting. This is why the manor feels alive, even though it is not alive in the human sense. Its life is measured in patience, in restraint, and the accumulation of quiet human experience over centuries. In this space, you begin to confront thoughts you have avoided. You notice regrets, doubts, desires, and silences that you usually ignore. The manor does not ask for them, it simply offers space for them to surface. And they surface, slowly, uncomfortably, clearly, and once they are present, you cannot easily dismiss them. This is the subtle horror of the house. It does not attack, it does not demand, it does not chase. It waits, and in waiting, it transforms the visitor, just as it has transformed countless lives before. Even after leaving, the manor's lessons persist. You carry the rhythm of restraint into your daily life. You notice silences, pauses, stillness, and absence in ways that you never did before. You feel the weight of suppressed potential and unspoken words pressing gently against your awareness. And you realize, with a slow, creeping understanding, that part of the manor has moved with you. Its patience, its observation, its quiet endurance are now part of your consciousness. This is the true haunting. Not ghosts, not curses, no screams. The house is not supernatural. Its power is psychological, eternal, and relentless. It teaches through presence, through reflection, through the subtle magnification of what is already present within you. Its influence is enduring, and its lessons are universal. Restraint, patience, endurance, quiet observation, the reflection of the self through the mirror of history. The manor's influence is subtle, but it is persistent. Over time, you begin to sense the rhythm of the house as if it were breathing along with you. It does not move or act. It simply exists. But its existence presses upon your mind, slowly, imperceptibly. The longer you remain in its imagined halls, the more your thoughts synchronize with its cadence. Pauses become longer, movement becomes more deliberate. Even the simplest decisions, how to lift a hand, how to shift your weight, how to breathe, are influenced by the unspoken lessons embedded in the structure. Every room is layered with memory, not stories, not events, but the emotional residue of centuries. A nursery where children learned that crying was unacceptable, a dining hall where conversation was measured and laughter was a rare intrusion, a library where silence was golden and curiosity was dangerous. These spaces do not simply hold memory, they radiate it. You feel it in the air, in the temperature, in the weight of the floorboards beneath your feet. Even in your imagination, the house can be felt as tangibly as if it were physical. The house teaches without speaking. Every creak of a floorboard, every slight draft through a door, every shadow falling just so, instructs without instruction. It shows you how to move quietly, how to observe carefully, how to restrain yourself instinctively. You obey without realizing it, and obedience here is not forced, it is natural, almost comforting. The manor has perfected the art of shaping human behavior through presence alone. Victorian life demanded endurance, and the house absorbed that virtue deeply. Children grew up learning that restraint was more valuable than expression. Women learned that silence was protection. Men learned that composure was power. These lessons, passed down through generations, became embedded in the very walls, and those walls, patient and unyielding, passed these lessons onto everyone who entered, even centuries later. Time behaves differently here. Minutes stretch, hours compress, and the outside world begins to feel distant. In the stillness of the manor, you become hyper-aware of every sound, every shadow, every breath. The ordinary distractions of modern life fade. You notice the patterns of your own behavior, the habitual pauses, the silences, the little compromises you make every day to maintain order and avoid conflict. And you realize that these patterns resonate perfectly with the house. This is the true power of the manor. It does not frighten you with ghosts. It does not terrify you with curses. It does not demand belief. It mirrors what is already present within you. It reflects your restraint, your quiet endurance, your habitual self-suppression, and it amplifies it, making you aware in ways that are uncomfortable, revealing, and hypnotic. As your awareness deepens, the manor becomes infinite. Hallways fold into themselves, staircases climb impossibly high and descend impossibly low. Rooms appear that you have never seen but feel intimately familiar, drawn from some hidden layer of memory. Each space carries its own emotional weight, hope unspoken, desire restrained, joy carefully measured, grief privately endured. You move through these spaces not as a visitor, but as a participant in a centuries-long rhythm of patience and endurance. The house communicates without words. Shadows lean as if listening. Light bends through windows in subtle ways. Floorboards respond faintly to weight. The air itself seems to shift, guiding your perception. You do not notice these details consciously, but they register deeply in your mind and body. They teach you gradually how to inhabit stillness, how to observe without interruption, how to feel without needing expression. You begin to understand that the haunting is not of ghosts or spirits, it is existential. It is the haunting of self-awareness, of the recognition of your own habits, your own unspoken compromises, your own patience under invisible pressure. The manor is not supernatural, it is psychological. It is timeless because the patterns it preserves, silence, restraint,
endurance, exist wherever humans have learned to suppress themselves in order to survive. Even after leaving, the manor follows quietly. It is not physical, it is mental. You notice its lessons in small moments, the pause before you speak, the hesitation before movement, the quiet patience that feels unusually deep. You recognize the subtle weight of endurance in your own body, in your own thoughts, in your own interactions. Part of the house has become part of you, and the awareness is permanent. Each generation that lived in the manor added layers to its influence. Every suppressed emotion, every carefully controlled behavior, every act of endurance or restraint became part of the building, and the building, patient and unyielding, absorbed these patterns. Over centuries, it became a repository not of events, but of habits, rhythms, and psychological structures. Visitors in imagination, as they move through the house, echo these patterns naturally. Their movements, gestures, thoughts, and pauses unconsciously align with centuries of precedent. You may notice that even imagined footsteps feel measured. Conversations that occur in your mind while navigating the manor are quiet, deliberate. Decisions, even hypothetical ones, are approached with patience, and this is no accident. The manor teaches subtly, invisibly, effectively. Silence becomes heavy. It is not oppressive, not at first. It is persistent, patient. It accumulates over hours, then days, then decades of history. And in that silence, awareness grows, awareness of patterns, of habits, of the suppressed parts of the self. You do not escape it because it is not something outside of you, it is within you, mirrored by the house, amplified and clarified. Over time, you begin to notice the smallest details, the angle of a shadow, the faint scent of wax or wood polish, the slight give in a stair tread, the way light falls across a table at noon, imagined. These details are not random, they are imprints of lives lived under meticulous attention to propriety, to order, to patience. And as you notice them, you feel your perception adjust. Your awareness becomes finer, slower, deeper. You inhabit the rhythm of centuries without realizing it. This is the essence of the haunted manor, not spectacle, not fear, not sudden shocks, but endurance, observation, patience, and reflection. It is a mirror, reflecting not your past, not your future, but your present self, shaped by patterns learned long ago and preserved in the very structure of the building. As you continue to wander the corridors of the manor, whether in imagination or memory, you notice the subtle differences in the atmosphere between rooms. Some rooms carry the echoes of laughter restrained, faint, almost polite, careful laughter that never quite reached joy. Others hold the whisper of reprimand, soft admonishments that layered the air with anxiety and caution over generations. Each sound, each absence of sound, carries weight. And though no one is speaking now, you can feel the accumulation of centuries of quiet control pressing gently, persistently into the space around you. The house teaches without teaching. Its influence is subtle, yet inevitable. You find yourself slowing down, moving more deliberately, considering your thoughts before even allowing them to form. It is not that the house commands you, it mirrors you, and in reflecting your own restraint, it amplifies it. The very act of thinking, of pausing, of controlling your expression becomes a part of the experience. You are not merely inside the manor, you are being absorbed by it, by its rhythm, by its patience. Time is no longer linear here. Minutes stretched into hours, hours compressed into moments. Days might pass, and yet the manor feels untouched, eternal, unchanged. And the lack of change, the perfection of its constancy begins to affect you. You begin to notice how quickly modern life demands noise, movement, distraction, and attention.
You begin to realize how alien such demands feel to a place like this, where quiet observation is not only accepted, but essential. In contrast, your own restlessness now feels conspicuous, almost improper, as though it might disturb the delicate balance maintained by centuries of patience. Every surface in the manor tells a story. Floorboards, polished by careful hands, retain the memory of footsteps moving silently for fear of reprimand. Tables and chairs, arranged with exacting care, suggest lives of meticulous attention to appearance over comfort. Even the walls, painted, faded, patched over centuries, contain echoes of conversation carefully moderated, of emotions swallowed to maintain propriety, of every subtle gesture made to please or avoid notice. And you, moving through these spaces, feel each layer, each memory, each restraint as if it were pressing against your own consciousness. The house does not frighten you. It does not need to. Its power lies in patience, in reflection, in the awareness it cultivates. The haunting is psychological, not supernatural. You are haunted not by apparitions, but by your own reflection in the mirror of human endurance. The house does not demand obedience. It encourages it silently, gently, and it is impossible not to comply. You adopt its rhythm instinctively. Your breathing slows. Your movements become deliberate. Your thoughts become measured. You begin to inhabit the cadence of centuries of restraint without realizing it. You may notice, too, that rooms appear to shift subtly, unnaturally. A hallway you thought you knew extends farther than before. A staircase seems to curve impossibly. Doors open into spaces that were not there moments ago, yet feel familiar. You understand, gradually, that the manor is infinite, not in its physical dimensions, but in its psychological depth. It is a place that expands to contain every layer of human restraint, every unspoken word, every carefully hidden thought, every suppressed desire. The house reflects, amplifies, and preserves them. The more you dwell in this imagined or remembered space, the more deeply you begin to recognize patterns in your own behavior. You notice the moments you remain silent to avoid conflict, the times you restrain desire to maintain propriety, the choices you postpone, the words you do not speak, the feelings you bury. And the manor mirrors these, holding them alongside the countless lives it has contained. You are not alone here. You are in the company of centuries of quiet endurance. Silence in the manor carries weight. At first it is comforting, almost meditative, but over time it becomes oppressive, not forcefully, not dramatically, but inexorably. You notice your own thoughts, your own suppressed impulses, and they feel louder, more immediate, more pressing. And yet the house does not demand expression, it merely waits. It does not need noise, because the sound of stillness is louder than any shout. The house teaches that restraint is not absence, but presence, that silence is not emptiness, but accumulation. The manor is a mirror of human potential and human restraint. Its true haunting lies not in fear, but in reflection. It shows you the parts of yourself that conform, that obey, that silently endure. It reveals the weight of unspoken emotions, postponed decisions, abandoned desires. And in revealing them, it invites contemplation, awareness, and transformation. It is not cruel. It is not benevolent. It simply exists as a repository for human patience, and in doing so, it shapes anyone who enters. Visitors, real or imagined, find that their own habits begin to align with the rhythms of the house. Movement becomes measured, breathing becomes deliberate, thought slows and deepens. Even imagination begins to reflect the infinite corridors, the ever-shifting staircases, the rooms layered with memory. And in this alignment, the house achieves its true influence. It shapes consciousness, subtly, slowly, inexorably. The haunted manor is not confined to space or time. It is an idea, a pattern, a rhythm of human endurance preserved in structure and memory. Once you have experienced it, even in imagination, it cannot be forgotten. Its lessons persist, carried into everyday life. Silence feels heavier, observation feels more acute, patience feels unnatural yet necessary. You begin to notice the restraint, the control, the careful modulation of behavior in yourself and others, and you understand, with a slow creeping dread, that part of the manor now exists in your mind.
As you continue to wander the corridors of the manor, whether in imagination or memory, you notice the subtle differences in the atmosphere between rooms. Some rooms carry the echoes of laughter restrained, faint, almost polite, careful laughter that never quite reached joy. Others hold the whisper of reprimand, soft admonishments that layered the air with anxiety and caution over generations. Each sound, each absence of sound carries weight, and though no one is speaking now, you can feel the accumulation of centuries of quiet control pressing gently, persistently into the space around you. The house teaches without teaching. Its influence is subtle yet inevitable. You find yourself slowing down, moving more deliberately, considering your thoughts before even allowing them to form. It is not that the house commands you, it mirrors you, and in reflecting your own restraint, it amplifies it. The very act of thinking, of pausing, of controlling your expression becomes a part of the experience. You are not merely inside the manor, you are being absorbed by it, by its rhythm, by its patience. Time is no longer linear here. Minutes stretch into hours, hours compress into moments. Days might pass, and yet the manor feels untouched, eternal, unchanged. And the lack of change, the perfection of its constancy, begins to affect you. You begin to notice how quickly modern life demands noise, movement, distraction, and attention. You begin to realize how alien such demands feel to a place like this, where quiet observation is not only accepted, but essential. In contrast, your own restlessness now feels conspicuous, almost improper, as though it might disturb the delicate balance maintained by centuries of patience. Every surface in the manor tells a story. Floorboards polished by careful hands retain the memory of footsteps moving silently for fear of reprimand. Tables and chairs arranged with exacting care suggest lives of meticulous attention to appearance over comfort. Even the walls, painted, faded, patched over centuries, contain echoes of conversation carefully moderated, of emotions swallowed to maintain propriety, of every subtle gesture made to please or avoid notice. And you, moving through these spaces, feel each layer, each memory, each restraint as if it were pressing against your own consciousness. The house does not frighten you. It does not need to. Its power lies in patience, in reflection, in the awareness it cultivates. The haunting is psychological, not supernatural. You are haunted not by apparitions, but by your own reflection in the mirror of human endurance. The house does not demand obedience, it encourages it silently, gently, and it is impossible not to comply. You adopt its rhythm instinctively. Your breathing slows, your movements become deliberate, your thoughts become measured. You begin to inhabit the cadence of centuries of restraint without realizing it. You may notice, too, that rooms appear to shift, subtly, unnaturally. A hallway you thought you knew extends farther than before. A staircase seems to curve impossibly. Doors open into spaces that were not there moments ago, yet feel familiar. You understand, gradually, that the manor is infinite, not in its physical dimensions, but in its psychological depth. It is a place that expands to contain every layer of human restraint, every unspoken word, every carefully hidden thought, every suppressed desire. The house reflects, amplifies, and preserves them. The more you dwell in this imagined or remembered space, the more deeply you begin to recognize patterns in your own behavior. You notice the moments you remain silent to avoid conflict, the times you restrain desire to maintain propriety, the choices you postpone, the words you do not speak, the feelings you bury. And the manor mirrors these, holding them alongside the countless lives it has contained. You are not alone here. You are in the company of centuries of quiet endurance. Silence in the manor carries weight. At first, it is comforting, almost meditative, but over time it becomes oppressive, not forcefully, not dramatically, but inexorably. You notice your own thoughts, your own suppressed impulses, and they feel louder, more immediate, more pressing. And yet, the house does not demand expression. It merely waits. It does not need noise because the sound of stillness is louder than any shout. The house teaches that restraint is not absence, but presence, that silence is not emptiness, but accumulation. The manor is a mirror of human potential and human restraint. Its true haunting lies not in fear, but in reflection. It shows you the parts of yourself that conform, that obey, that silently endure. It reveals the weight of unspoken emotions, postponed decisions, abandoned desires. And in revealing them, it invites contemplation, awareness, and transformation. It is not cruel, it is not benevolent, it simply exists as a repository for human patience, and in doing so, it shapes anyone who enters. Visitors, real or imagined, find that their own habits begin to align with the rhythms of the house. Movement becomes measured, breathing becomes deliberate, thought slows and deepens. Even imagination begins to reflect the infinite corridors, the ever-shifting staircases, the rooms layered with memory. And in this alignment, the house achieves its true influence. It shapes consciousness, subtly, slowly, inexorably. The haunted manor is not confined to space or time. It is an idea, a pattern, a rhythm of human endurance preserved in structure and memory. Once you have experienced it, even in imagination, it cannot be forgotten. Its lessons persist, carried into everyday life. Silence feels heavier, observation feels more acute, patience feels unnatural yet necessary. You begin to notice the restraint, the control, the careful modulation of behavior in yourself and others, and you understand with a slow, creeping dread that part of the manor exists now in your mind. The longer you remain within the idea of the manor, you begin to understand that it doesn't simply exist in stone and timber. It exists in habit. It exists in memory. It exists in the quiet spaces between thoughts. The Victorian era did not only build houses like this, it shaped minds to live inside them. And the manor carries that shape forward long after the people themselves have turned to dust. You begin to sense that the house was never meant to be loud. It was designed to contain emotion, not express it. Grief was folded neatly into schedules. Love was spoken through glances, never through words. Anger was swallowed, pressed down, layered under etiquette until it hardened into something unrecognizable. And all of that pressure, all of that restraint, had to go somewhere. The manor became the vessel. The walls learned to listen long before they learned to stand. They absorbed whispered confessions spoken into darkness, prayers murmured by trembling lips, and apologies that were never answered. Each generation added another layer, another weight, another silence. And silence, when held long enough, becomes something else entirely. It becomes presence. At night, the manor does not sleep. It remembers. Not actively, not deliberately, but instinctively. Every creak is not a ghost announcing itself, but wood adjusting under the burden of centuries. Every sigh of wind through narrow corridors feels intentional, as if the house itself is exhaling after holding its breath for too long. Those who lived here learned early that emotion was dangerous. Children were taught stillness before speech. They learned to walk softly, to close doors gently, to lower their voices even when alone. Over time, these lessons became instinct. Even when no one was watching, restraint remained. And when restraint becomes habit, habit becomes identity. You can feel that identity pressing in as you imagine moving deeper into the manor. It encourages reflection. It discourages urgency. Modern impatience feels out of place here, almost disrespectful. The house does not respond to force or curiosity. It responds to patience. And patience, when stretched thin, begins to feel like surrender. Some rooms feel heavier than others, though nothing visible explains why. These are the rooms where decisions were delayed too long, where letters were never sent, where goodbyes were postponed until it was too late. The air feels thicker here, not because of spirits, but because of unresolved intention. The house remembers not only what happened, but what almost happened, and that weight is often heavier. Mirrors within the manor are unsettling, not because they show something unnatural, but because they show too much. They reflect you as you are now, layered with the influence of the space. Your posture subtly changed, your expression more reserved, your eyes more observant. You look like someone who belongs to a quieter time, someone accustomed to listening rather than speaking, and for a moment it feels natural. The manor does not resist when you try to leave it. That is another thing you slowly understand. There are no locked doors, no barred windows, no sudden sense of panic pushing you back. The exit is always there, visible, quiet, waiting. And yet, the longer you remain, the less urgent leaving feels. The house does not imprison the body, it persuades the mind. As you drift deeper into its memory, you begin to realize that this place was never meant to be escaped in the traditional sense. People left it physically all the time. They married, moved away, traveled, died. But something of them always stayed behind, pressed gently into the structure, absorbed into the rhythm of the walls. And in return, something of the manor followed them out into the world, a way of thinking, a way of holding back, a way of choosing silence when speech felt dangerous. The Victorian era mastered the art of emotional architecture. Not just buildings, but lives were constructed with layers of restraint. Every gesture carried meaning. Every word was weighed. To feel too much was improper. To show too much was dangerous. And so feelings were tucked away, folded neatly like letters never meant to be sent. Over time, those unsent letters accumulated. The manor became their archive. You can sense the lives that shaped it, not as ghosts with faces or voices, but as impressions. A woman who stood at the window every evening waiting for footsteps that never came. A child who learned early that obedience brought quiet praise, while curiosity brought cold disapproval. A man who measured his worth not by happiness, but by how well he endured. None of them scream, none of them beg. They simply remain. And that remaining is what changes you. You begin to notice how the house rewards stillness. When you stop moving, the atmosphere feels calmer. When you stop questioning, the weight eases slightly. When you accept the silence, it becomes almost comforting. This is not coincidence. The manor was built for compliance, for endurance, for the quiet acceptance of one's place in the structure, and it recognizes those qualities instantly. The lighting never feels harsh here. Shadows are soft, elongated, forgiving. Darkness does not rush in. It settles slowly, like a blanket laid with care. Even fear, when it arises, feels muted, not sharp or violent, but dull and persistent, like a thought you cannot quite push away. The house teaches you that intensity is unnecessary, control is more effective. You might notice that your voice, if you imagine speaking, lowers naturally, not out of fear, but respect, as though raising it would feel inappropriate. The walls have heard too much already. They do not need more noise. They need order. And slyly, unconsciously, you provide it.
The longer you remain in this mental space, the more the manor begins to feel less haunted and more honest. It does not pretend to be kind. It does not pretend to be cruel. It simply reflects what happens when human emotion is denied release for too long, when expression is traded for appearance, when peace is mistaken for silence. And somewhere in that realization, discomfort grows. Because the manor stops feeling like history, it starts feeling familiar. You recognize its patterns in modern life, in rooms where people avoid difficult conversations, in relationships where emotions are carefully managed instead of shared, in routines that feel safe but slowly drain vitality. The manor is not trapped in the Victorian era. It survived by adopting, by embedding itself into behavior rather than stone. This is why it never collapses. Structures built of repression are incredibly durable. They do not crumble dramatically. They persist quietly. As you continue to exist within this narrative, the manor expands again, not outward, but inward. It offers endless rooms not because it needs space, but because human experience is vast. There is a room for every regret, a hallway for every postponed decision, a staircase for every ambition that never quite reached its destination. And still, nothing attacks you, nothing chases you, nothing forces you to stay, which is what makes it so powerful. The house trusts time to do the work. It knows that given enough stillness, people begin to confuse endurance with strength, silence with peace, survival with living. And once that confusion sets in, the manor no longer needs walls. It exists wherever those patterns are repeated. Eventually, you realize the most unsettling truth of all. The haunted manor does not want to frighten you. It wants to teach you how easy it is to disappear without ever leaving. And as that thought settles in, slowly, quietly, without drama, you understand why so many never truly escaped it at all.
As time settles further into the manor, you begin to feel something subtle but undeniable. The house is no longer simply being observed. It is observing you. Not with intention, not with awareness, but with the quiet certainty of something that has watched countless lives unfold and dissolve. The manor does not judge. It records. And in recording, it transforms. The Victorian era believed deeply in order of class, order of behavior, order of emotion. Chaos was feared more than pain, and expression was treated as a threat to stability. Within these walls, people learned that survival meant containment. You did not raise your voice. You did not reveal desire. You did not confess doubt. You endured, and endurance, repeated long enough, became virtue. That belief still lingers here. You feel it in the way rooms seem to encourage you to pause before entering, as though asking whether you are prepared to bring yourself inside. You feel it in the way doorways frame space carefully, deliberately, forcing you to acknowledge transition. Nothing here is rushed. Everything is measured. Even fear moves slowly. As you imagine walking deeper, the manor's silence grows more textured. It is no longer empty silence. It is layered. It contains echoes of footsteps that learned to tread softly. It carries the residue of conversations stopped mid-sentence. It holds the weight of words swallowed to preserve dignity. The silence is full. And in that fullness, the house begins to feel heavier. Not physically, but emotionally. You may start to notice an unusual sensation, an urge to reflect on your own life. Moments where you chose restraint over honesty. Times when you stayed quiet to keep peace. Decisions delayed because they felt disruptive. The manor does not force these thoughts. It invites them. And once invited, they arrive willingly. The haunted nature of this place is not built on fear of the unknown, but recognition of the familiar.
That is why it unsettles, because you realize that the manor is not an anomaly, it is an exaggeration of patterns humanity has practiced for centuries. It is the architectural embodiment of emotional discipline taken too far. The people who lived here did not consider themselves oppressed. They believed they were refined, civilized, proper. But refinement has a cost. Every feeling denied expression does not disappear. It relocates. It settles into posture. It shapes breath. It alters thought. Over generations, these internal adjustments became so normal they were no longer noticed, until the house began to notice for them. You can almost sense the accumulation of lives overlapping, a grandmother's restraint layered over a daughter's obedience, layered over a child's learned silence. Each generation inherited not only property, but behavior. The manor was the anchor, the constant presence reminding them how to exist without disruption. And now, standing within this narrative, you inherit it too. Not because you are weak, but because you are human. The manor teaches slowly. It rewards patience. It encourages reflection. It blurs the line between comfort and confinement. And eventually, you begin to understand that the most dangerous environments are not those that provoke fear, but those that normalize limitation. Hours could pass here without notice. The mind adapts. The stillness becomes routine, and routine, once established, resists change. This is how people stayed, not trapped by force, but held by familiarity. Leaving felt unnecessary, speaking felt excessive, wanting felt dangerous. The manor did not need ghosts, it had habits. As your imagined presence lingers, the house feels less like a structure and more like a state of mind, a slow tightening, a gentle narrowing, a reduction of possibility disguised as peace. And somewhere within that narrowing, something vital begins to dim, not suddenly, not painfully, but quietly. That is the most unsettling part. Nothing breaks, nothing screams, nothing collapses. Life simply becomes smaller, and the manor stands, patient as ever, preserving that process.
As the hours pass within the presence of the manor, something curious begins to happen. Your sense of self loosens, not disappears, not shudders, just loosens. The rigid edges of identity soften. You stop thinking of yourself as a visitor. You stop thinking of yourself as separate. The house does not absorb you aggressively. It invites you to rest inside it, the way one rests inside a familiar thought. This place has always understood that control does not require force. It requires repetition, routine, subtle expectation. The Victorian mind was shaped by this principle. People learned who they were by learning who they were not allowed to be, and those lessons were reinforced daily, quietly, relentlessly. The manor remembers those lessons because it was built to support them. When people lived here, their lives unfolded slowly. Days followed strict patterns. Meals occurred at precise hours. Conversations followed unspoken rules. Even grief had a schedule. You mourned, but not too openly. You loved, but not too freely. You endured, because endurance was admired more than happiness. And endurance leaves residue. That residue still clings to the stair rails, the door frames, the corners of rooms where people paused before speaking. It is not visible, but it is felt, like pressure, like expectation, like a reminder that nothing must be expressed too fully. As you remain within this imagined space, you begin to feel how the house reshapes attention. You stop looking for sudden scares. You stop anticipating danger. Instead, you settle into awareness, into listening, into waiting. The manor rewards patience with clarity. It strips away urgency until only observation remains.
and observation prolonged long enough becomes unsettling. You start noticing patterns in the silence, not sounds, but absences, spaces where something should have happened but didn't, moments frozen in indecision. The house is full of these pauses, lives paused mid-choice, words halted mid-thought, emotions suspended indefinitely. This is why the manor feels endless, not because it has infinite rooms, but because unresolved moments do not age, they do not decay, they remain exactly as they were when first suppressed, and over time they accumulate. You feel them now, a tightening in the chest when you imagine speaking freely here, a subtle hesitation before moving too quickly, the sense that being expressive would somehow violate the space. These reactions are learned, not imposed. The manor teaches without instruction. It teaches by example. Those who lived here did not consider themselves haunted. They considered themselves proper. But propriety can become a cage when it replaces authenticity. And the manor, slowly, quietly, became that cage. Not locked, not guarded, but respected. Respect is more powerful than fear, because people will obey what they respect without question. As you drift deeper into the narrative, the house begins to feel increasingly intimate, not comforting, intimate. It knows human weakness because it was built around it. It understands avoidance, delay, compliance. It understands how easily people trade freedom for predictability. That is why the manor still stands, because it mirrors something timeless. You realize, gradually, that the haunted nature of this place has nothing to do with death. Death is simple, final, clean in comparison. What haunts the manor is life, unfinished life, lived cautiously, lived partially, lived in preparation for a future that never arrived. The house holds these lives gently. It does not mock them, it preserves them, and preservation without release becomes haunting. Hours stretch further, thought slows further. You begin to feel the weight of stillness as something physical, something pressing gently against your awareness. The manor asks nothing of you. That is its greatest demand, because when nothing is asked, you are left alone with yourself. And that is when people begin to feel uneasy. Not because of ghosts, but because silence reveals what noise conceals. The manor has always known this. That is why it waits. That is why it endures. And that is why even now, long after the era that built it has faded into history, its influence remains intact. Because the haunted manor is not a place, it is a pattern. And patterns survive time.
As the manor continues to exist around you, not as a structure, but as a presence, something deeper begins to unfold. The house no longer feels like a place you are visiting. It feels like a place you are remembering, even if you have never been here before. That is the first sign that its influence is settling in. Memory begins to form where experience never existed. The Victorian mind believed that discipline was safety, that order prevented chaos, that restraint protected society from collapse. Inside this manor, those beliefs hardened into routine. Day after day, life unfolded predictably. Predictability became comfort. Comfort became dependence, and dependence slowly replaced freedom. The house absorbed that transformation. Every corridor feels deliberate, shaped to guide movement rather than invite exploration. You are encouraged to walk straight, not wander. Doors open fully or remain closed completely. There is little room for ambiguity here. And yet, emotionally, everything remains unresolved. That contradiction defines the manor. Absolute order on the surface, infinite uncertainty beneath. As time stretches on, you begin to feel the weight of observation, not from eyes, but from expectation. The expectation to behave, to remain composed,
to be quiet even when alone. The house does not demand these things verbally. It never had to. It trained generations to demand them from themselves. You start to understand how this place shaped identity. People did not ask who they were, they asked who they should be. Individual desire mattered less than collective appearance, and over time, the distance between the two grew so wide that many stopped noticing it at all. The manor feels heavy with those unnoticed distances. Somewhere in its endless rooms, you sense the presence of lives lived carefully, not cautiously but deliberately. Every choice weighed, every emotion filtered. Love expressed through duty rather than affection, grief contained within acceptable boundaries, joy restrained so it would not draw attention. The house did not punish expression, society did, and the manor became the stage upon which that silent performance repeated endlessly. As you remain here longer, your thoughts begin to slow. Modern urgency fades. There is no pressure to react, no need to respond. The house rewards stillness with a strange sense of belonging. You feel as though moving too quickly would break something delicate, something old. This is how the manor keeps people. Not through fear, through reverence. Reverence for tradition, for silence, for endurance. Hours pass, or perhaps they do not. Time loses its structure here. The manor exists in a continuous present, layered with the past. You feel moments overlapping. A conversation from a century ago feels close, almost immediate. A hesitation before a confession feels fresh, unresolved. You begin to realize that the house is filled not with memories, but with pauses. Pauses that were never released, pauses that became permanent. Lives paused at the edge of change, waiting for permission that never came. Those pauses echo. They do not speak, they wait. The house is patient because it learned patience from the people who lived inside it, people who waited for the right time, for the right approval, for circumstances to change, and often those people waited their entire lives. The manor remembers them. It remembers the quiet despair that never reached expression, the longing that was never named, the ambition that softened into acceptance. These things do not disappear when ignored. They settle, they linger, they shape the environment. That is why the manor feels alive, not with ghosts, with unresolved humanity. As your awareness deepens, you feel a subtle tension forming inside yourself, a recognition. You begin to notice how often you too pause, how often you hold back, how often you choose comfort over truth. The house does not accuse you of this. It simply reflects it back gently, honestly. Reflection can be more unsettling than fear, because reflection offers no escape. The house does not end. It does not build to a climax. It does not reveal a monster. That is intentional. The true horror of the manor is that it continues, that it persists, that it mirrors patterns still alive in the modern world. You realize that this place exists wherever people suppress themselves to maintain order, wherever silence is mistaken for peace, wherever endurance replaces joy. The Victorian manor was simply the most honest expression of that philosophy. And now, sitting within this narration, listening, imagining, breathing slowly, you understand why the house never needed to trap anyone. People brought the cage with them. They built it inside themselves, and the manor welcomed it. The house remains, waiting, not for footsteps, but for recognition.
The manor does not react to your continued presence. That too is important. It never rushes, it never acknowledges urgency. It has learned over centuries that anything worth shaping will eventually slow down on its own. Human beings always do. Given enough quiet, enough repetition, enough space without interruption, the mind settles into patterns. And patterns are what the manor understands best. As you remain within this story, the sense of separation between listener and place continues to thin. You are no longer imagining the manor as something external. It begins to feel internal, as if the architecture has quietly rearranged itself inside your thoughts. Hallways become trains of memory. Rooms resemble emotional states you recognize but rarely name. Doors feel like decisions postponed rather than choices made. The Victorian world that created this place was obsessed with legacy. Not happiness, not fulfillment. Legacy. To leave behind something intact, respectable, unblemished. And to do that, people learned to edit themselves. They removed what felt inconvenient. They hid what felt disruptive. Over time, those hidden parts did not disappear. They pressed inward. The manor became a container for that inward pressure. You sense now that the house was never meant to be lived in comfortably. It was meant to be maintained, preserved, kept. Even the idea of decay here feels controlled. Cracks do not spread wildly. Dust settles neatly. Age expresses itself politely. Disorder is not allowed to dominate. Everything decays with dignity. That dignity has a cost. The cost is movement, change, release. As the hours of narration continue, your awareness becomes more attuned to the emotional temperature of the manor. It is cool but not cold, calm but not peaceful. There is a constant restraint beneath every sensation, a reminder that expression must always be moderated. Even curiosity feels tempered here. You may notice that your breathing slows as you listen. That is not accidental. The rhythm of the narration mirrors the rhythm of the house. Slow, even, measured. The manor does not like sharp edges. It smooths everything over time. This is how it survives. People often imagine haunted places as violent or chaotic, but chaos destroys itself. The manor understands endurance. It understands how systems last. And systems last by teaching people how to limit themselves voluntarily. As you linger, you begin to feel the quiet exhaustion of generations. Not physical exhaustion, but emotional fatigue. The kind that comes from always being composed, always being acceptable, always being watched even when alone. That fatigue soaked into the floors, it climbed the walls, it settled into the ceilings, and now it hangs gently in the air. The house does not whisper secrets, it holds them. And holding secrets for too long changes their shape. They become heavier, denser, harder to release. Eventually, they stop feeling like secrets at all. They feel like truth, unquestionable, permanent. This is the final transformation the manor offers. It turns temporary restraint into permanent identity. As you move deeper into this awareness, the idea of leaving feels increasingly abstract, not because you are trapped, but because the question no longer feels urgent. The outside world feels loud, chaotic, unstructured. The manor offers something deceptively appealing: predictability. Predictability feels safe when uncertainty feels overwhelming. That is how people stayed. That is how people still stay in places like this and in patterns like these. The haunted manor does not collapse in flames. It does not reveal a final horror. It simply continues, as it always has,
shaping those who pass through it into quieter versions of themselves. And when they leave, they carry that quiet with them. The house never needed chains. It taught people to hold themselves still.
The manor does not react to your continued presence. That, too, is important. It never rushes. It never acknowledges urgency. It has learned over centuries that anything worth shaping will eventually slow down on its own. Human beings always do. Given enough quiet, enough repetition, enough space without interruption, the mind settles into patterns, and patterns are what the manor understands best. As you remain within this story, the sense of separation between listener and place continues to thin. You are no longer imagining the manor as something external. It begins to feel internal, as if the architecture has quietly rearranged itself inside your thoughts. Hallways become trains of memory. Rooms resemble emotional states you recognize but rarely name. Doors feel like decisions postponed rather than choices made. The Victorian world that created this place was obsessed with legacy. Not happiness, not fulfillment, legacy. To leave behind something intact, respectable, unblemished. And to do that, people learned to edit themselves. They removed what felt inconvenient. They hid what felt disruptive. Over time, those hidden parts did not disappear. They pressed inward. The manor became a container for that inward pressure. You sense now that the house was never meant to be lived in comfortably. It was meant to be maintained, preserved, kept. Even the idea of decay here feels controlled. Cracks do not spread wildly. Dust settles neatly. Age expresses itself politely. Disorder is not allowed to dominate. Everything decays with dignity. That dignity has a cost. The cost is movement, change, release. As the hours of narration continue, your awareness becomes more attuned to the emotional temperature of the manor. It is cool but not cold, calm but not peaceful. There is a constant restraint beneath every sensation, a reminder that expression must always be moderated. Even curiosity feels tempered here. You may notice that your breathing slows as you listen. That is not accidental. The rhythm of the narration mirrors the rhythm of the house, slow, even, measured. The manor does not like sharp edges. It smooths everything over time. This is how it survives. People often imagine haunted places as violent or chaotic, but chaos destroys itself. The manor understands endurance. It understands how systems last, and systems last by teaching people how to limit themselves voluntarily. As you linger, you begin to feel the quiet exhaustion of generations, not physical exhaustion, but emotional fatigue, the kind that comes from always being composed, always being acceptable, always being watched even when alone. That fatigue soaked into the floors, it climbed the walls, it settled into the ceilings, and now it hangs gently in the air. The house does not whisper secrets, it holds them, and holding secrets for too long changes their shape. They become heavier, denser, harder to release. Eventually, they stop feeling like secrets at all. They feel like truth, unquestionable, permanent. This is the final transformation the manor offers. It turns temporary restraint to permanent identity. As you move deeper into this awareness, the idea of leaving feels increasingly abstract, not because you are trapped, but because the question no longer feels urgent. The outside world feels loud, chaotic, unstructured. The manor offers something deceptively appealing:
Predictability. Predictability feels safe when uncertainty feels overwhelming. That is how people stayed. That is how people still stay in places like this and in patterns like these. The haunted manor does not collapse in flames. It does not reveal a final horror. It simply continues, as it always has, shaping those who pass through it into quieter versions of themselves. And when they leave, they carry that quiet with them. The house never needed chains. It taught people how to hold themselves still. The manor accepts your return to the story without acknowledgement. It does not greet you because it never learned how. Greeting implies warmth, invitation, emotional openness. Those were never its language. Instead, it simply resumes the way a long-held thought resumes when silence ends, as if nothing was interrupted, as if you had never left. The longer this narration unfolds, the more the manor reveals its true nature, not as a place of fear, but as a place of conditioning. It is not interested in startling you. Startle fades quickly. It is interested in shaping you. Shaping lasts. Inside these imagined walls, people once learned that emotions were liabilities, that joy must be modest, that sorrow must be contained, that anger must be redirected inward until it lost its edge. Children absorbed these lessons before they learned their own desires. Adults passed them down without realizing they were doing so. The manor did not invent this behavior, it refined it. And refinement is subtle. You feel that subtlety now. There is no sharp dread, no sudden panic, only a growing awareness that something essential has been quieted, that something vital has been asked to wait. And the most unsettling realization of all is that waiting feels normal. The house thrives on normalization. As you imagine sitting somewhere within it, perhaps not in a chair, but simply existing in the space, you notice how thought itself begins to soften. Urgent ideas dissolve before forming. Questions lose their sharpness. Curiosity becomes gentle, almost polite. The manor teaches you how to think less loudly. This is not peace. Peace has movement. This is suspension. The Victorian era prized composure because composure was visible. It could be admired, rewarded, displayed. Internal turmoil did not matter as long as the surface remained intact. The manor internalized that philosophy. It became a monument to appearances, a structure that looked stable while quietly holding everything that was never allowed to surface. That is why the manor feels so heavy without ever feeling violent, weight without force, pressure without resistance. As hours stretch on, you may begin to feel a strange familiarity, as if you have always known this place. That is because the manor represents something deeply human, the instinct to endure quietly rather than risk disruption, to adapt inwardly rather than confront outwardly, to survive by becoming smaller. This instinct has not disappeared with time, it has evolved. You recognize the manor now in modern spaces, in offices where emotions are filtered through professionalism, in homes where difficult conversations are postponed indefinitely, in lives where authenticity is sacrificed for stability. The manor is not bound to bricks and mortar. It exists wherever silence is mistaken for strength. And once you see that, the haunting deepens, because the manor is no longer behind you, it is around you. The house teaches that nothing dramatic needs to happen for damage to occur, that erosion is more effective than destruction, that people adapt to limitation far more easily than they resist it. Over time, adaptation becomes identity, and identity becomes destiny. You sense now that the manor never sought victims, it welcomed participants, people who believed they were choosing order, choosing propriety, choosing safety. And perhaps they were, but safety without expression becomes confinement. Order without flexibility becomes stagnation. The manor embodies that truth quietly. As this narration continues, stretching time, slowing breath, dulling urgency, you realize that the most frightening environments are not those that provoke fear, but those that gently persuade you to disappear, not physically, emotionally, gradually, without resistance. The haunted manor does not ask you to stay. It teaches you how to stop wanting to leave. And that lesson, once learned, is very difficult to unlearn. The manor accepts your return to the story without acknowledgement. It does not greet you because it never learned how. Greeting implies
The manor does not grow louder as the story continues. It grows quieter, and in that quiet, something far more powerful begins to take shape. Silence here is not empty space. It is a medium, a substance. It carries intention the way air carries scent. The longer you remain, the more you realize that the house has been speaking all along, just not in words. It speaks through repetition, through routine, through the gentle suggestion that nothing needs to change. In the Victorian era, stillness was mistaken for virtue. A calm exterior was praised even when the interior was collapsing. The manor absorbs that belief so deeply that it became part of its structure. Walls were built to separate, to contain, to keep things from spreading. Not just sound, but feeling. Corridors guided movement. Rooms dictated behavior. Everything had its place, and everything stayed there, including people. As the hours of narration stretch on, you begin to feel how the manor reshapes time itself. Moments do not pass here. They linger, they repeat, they circle back on themselves. A single hesitation can echo for decades. A single unspoken thought can occupy a room forever. This is not haunting in the traditional sense. It is preservation taken to its extreme. The house preserves restraint. It preserves obedience. It preserves the art of not reacting. And in doing so, it teaches those within it how to fade without disappearing. You may notice that the idea of resistance feels increasingly distant, not because resistance is impossible, but because it feels unnecessary. The manor does not fight you, it does not oppose you. It simply offers a version of existence where nothing is demanded and nothing is risked. For many, that feels like relief. That is how the house wins. People often believe that fear is what traps them, but fear is sharp. Fear provokes action. What truly traps people is comfort without fulfillment, stability without meaning, silence without peace. The manor offers all of these generously. As you imagine spending more time here, hours blending into one another, you feel the slow erosion of urgency. The need to decide fades. The desire to act softens. Even the idea of wanting something feels faint, almost inappropriate. The house does not forbid desire. It simply makes it feel unnecessary. This is the deepest layer of the haunting. The manor teaches you to stop reaching. Those who lived here once believed they were doing the right thing. They believed sacrifice was noble. They believed restraint was strength. And perhaps in small doses it was. But over lifetimes, those beliefs hardened into a way of being that left no room for expansion, no room for error, no joy that could not be controlled. The house remembers every moment of that hardening. It remembers the exact second someone decided not to speak, not to leave,
not to change. Those seconds never moved on. They stayed, suspended, like dust caught in still air. And now, as you listen, you feel them accumulating around you. Not threatening, just present. The manor does not punish those who notice this truth. It does not react at all. Awareness does not weaken it. In fact, awareness often deepens its effect. Because once you recognize the pattern, you see it everywhere, in yourself, in others, in the quiet agreements people make with their own limitations. And once seen, it cannot be unseen. The house does not need to follow you. You carry it. You carry it in the moments you choose silence over honesty, in the times you delay change because stability feels safer, in the way you tell yourself that someday is better than now. The house lives in those spaces. That is why it is endless. That is why this narration can continue without conclusion. Because the haunted manor is not waiting for an ending. It is waiting for recognition. And as long as people continue to confuse endurance with living, the house will remain exactly as it is, standing, patient, quiet.
The manor does not acknowledge how long you have been here. Time, in its understanding, is not measured in hours or minutes, but in repetition, in how often a thought returns, in how long a feeling is delayed, in how many times a person chooses stillness over movement. By that measure, the manor is ancient beyond calculation, and yet forever new to each mind that enters its rhythm. As the narration stretches onward, the house seems to soften around you, not warmer, not kinder, but more familiar. Familiarity is its greatest strength. The unfamiliar provokes caution. Familiarity invites surrender. The manor becomes something you recognize before you understand it, and that recognition lowers your guard more effectively than fear ever could. You begin to sense how deeply the Victorian era trusted appearances. A well-kept room suggested a well-kept life. A composed face implied moral strength. A quiet household meant harmony. And so the work of maintaining appearances became sacred. Everything that did not fit the image was carefully tucked away, not destroyed, just hidden. Hidden long enough to be forgotten. Forgotten long enough to be mistaken for absence. But absence is never empty. The manor learned this early. Every hidden thing left a pressure behind. Every suppressed emotion altered the atmosphere slightly. Over decades, over generations, those alterations accumulated. The house did not collapse under the weight. It adapted. It learned to hold it. And in learning to hold it, it learned how to shape those who entered. The rooms no longer feel separate from one another. They blur as thoughts blur when allowed to drift without interruption. You are not sure if you are standing, sitting, or simply existing within the space. The house does not require physical presence. It works just as effectively through imagination, through listening, through reflection. That is why this narration works, because the manor does not need walls when the mind is willing. As you continue listening, the world outside this story grows quieter, not gone, but distant. Urgency fades first, then distraction, then expectation. What remains is awareness, slow, steady, unchallenged. The manor thrives in that state. Awareness without action, insight without movement, understanding without change. You begin to realize that the people who lived here were not weak, they were disciplined, but discipline without release becomes rigidity, and rigidity over time becomes brittleness disguised as strength. The manor remembers the moment that transformation occurred, not once, but thousands of times across countless lives. It remembers the exact posture people adopted to appear composed, the way shoulders tightened, the way breath shortened, the way eyes learned to not linger too long on what they wanted. Those physical habits became emotional habits. Those emotional habits became generational inheritance.
The house was the witness, and witnesses never forget. As hours pass in this mental space, you may notice a quiet sadness emerging, not sharp, not overwhelming, but persistent. A sadness without a clear cause. That sadness belongs to the manor. It is the emotional residue of lives lived carefully instead of fully. It is not grief for what was lost, but for what was never attempted. The manor does not mourn loudly, it mourns continuously. And in that continuous mourning, it teaches a lesson without words, that safety can cost more than danger, that restraint can cost more than risk, that surviving can cost more than failing. But it does not state this lesson directly, it lets you feel it. That is why the house never needed to warn anyone. Those who understood stayed, those who didn't left but carried its influence with them. The manor does not discriminate. It does not cling, it does not chase, it simply offers a way of being that feels deceptively sustainable, until you realize how much of yourself you have set aside to maintain it. And as this realization settles slowly, quietly, without drama, the manor does what it has always done best. It waits. It waits for you to decide whether awareness is enough, or whether movement will follow.
The manor does not hurry. That is one of the first lessons it teaches, and it teaches it subtly. Time here does not feel like a line or a sequence. It feels like a layer, a slow sedimentation of experience, of choice, of restraint. The longer you remain, the more you notice how past, present, and imagined futures overlap. A single step down a corridor can evoke decades of decisions that were never made, words that were never spoken, and desires that were quietly buried. The silence grows heavier the longer you listen. It is not oppressive in the usual sense. There is no immediate threat, no sudden scream, no lightning flash of terror. It is the weight of waiting stretched over lifetimes. And in that waiting, the mind begins to slow. Breathing becomes steady, deliberate. Thoughts move carefully, measuredly, as if out of respect for the space they occupy. The house rewards this kind of observation. Quick movements, impatience, noise, they all seem alien here, out of place. The people who once inhabited these halls were masters of subtlety. Their victories were quiet, their failures were quieter. The house holds both in perfect equilibrium. A life lived carefully, avoiding attention, is preserved here in all its complexity. And because the house preserves, it also amplifies. Every hesitation, every restraint, every silent compromise echoes in the air, magnified over time until it becomes almost tangible. You begin to feel these echoes pressing gently against your awareness. Perhaps you notice how your own internal voice softens. You realize you're measuring your thoughts, choosing your words, even in the absence of anyone else. That is how the manor shapes people, not by force, not by threat, but by teaching the mind to obey itself, by reflecting your own restraint back at you until it becomes instinct. The rooms of the manor are not simply empty spaces. Each carries the weight of generations. A sitting room may hold centuries of unspoken conversations. A narrow staircase may bear the memory of children learning the art of quiet obedience. A hallway may contain the echo of countless decisions deferred, choices never taken. And as you imagine moving through these spaces, the house begins to merge with your own consciousness. It is no longer entirely external. It exists inside your mind as surely as it exists in imagined stone and timber. Time continues to stretch. Minutes fold into hours. Hours fold into decades. And in that folding, you begin to see patterns. Patterns of control. Patterns of silence. Patterns of endurance. The house does not create these patterns. It has always preserved them. But by noticing them, by immersing yourself in them, you begin to internalize them. You start to move, think, and breathe in accordance with the manor's rhythm. And that is the subtle power of the haunted manor. It does not scare you. It does not chase you. It does not need to.
It waits, it observes, it reflects, and in reflection, it shapes. Even as you consider leaving, you begin to realize something unsettling. The manor does not end at its walls. Its influence is not confined to stone or timber. Those who once lived here carried its lessons into the world, just as you now carry them in thought and feeling. Its presence is not limited to space. It exists wherever restraint, patience, and measured silence are valued above expression, risk, and full experience. And so the haunted manor continues. It waits patiently, quietly, endlessly, not for ghosts, not for intruders, not even for visitors. It waits for understanding. It waits for recognition. It waits for the moment when someone realizes that endurance can become imprisonment, that restraint can become a cage, and that silence, while seemingly peaceful, can be profoundly isolating.
The manor continues in silence, and in that silence, it teaches more than any voice ever could. The air itself seems deliberate here. It does not rush. It does not tremble. Even the smallest sound, the gentle creak of floorboards, the faint sigh of a distant wind, is measured, controlled, imbued with intention. And as you remain in this imagined space, you begin to notice the subtleties of that intention. How walls guide movement without force. How light falls carefully across surfaces to shape perception. How the house creates a rhythm that slows the mind and steadies the heart. You begin to feel that rhythm. It settles over you like a slow tide. Each breath you take begins to match it unconsciously. Thoughts drift gently, almost politely, as if they too are being moderated by the space. The manor does not demand attention, it coaxes it. It does not push you toward awareness, it simply reveals what is already there, layer by layer, fold by fold. And in that revelation, you begin to understand the house not as a building, but as a living archive of human restraint. Generations lived here under strict codes of behavior. Every gesture, every glance, every word was measured against invisible rules. Children were trained to anticipate expectations they could not name. Adults learned to suppress impulses they barely understood. And all of this was done not through punishment, but through repetition, through subtle reinforcement. Over decades, those lessons solidified. They became instinct, and the manor, absorbing every nuance, learned to carry them forward long after the people themselves had faded. The haunting is not in what appears, but in what endures. A closed door is not just wood, it is a decision deferred. A polished floor is not just surface, it is the careful concealment of fatigue, the silent insistence on propriety. Every corridor carries the weight of actions withheld, of desires restrained, of words left unspoken. And as you imagine moving through these corridors, you feel that weight pressing not outward, but inward. The house does not bear down on the body, it bears down on thought. Hours, or perhaps centuries, pass as your awareness deepens. The distinction between outside and inside, self and structure, begins to blur. The manor becomes less of a building and more of a state of mind, a state of suspended time, a space where endurance is natural and change feels unnecessary. Here, the ordinary pressures of the world, the need to act, to speak, to rush, fade into irrelevance. And in their absence, you begin to see patterns of self-restraint, of habitual silence, of unacknowledged longing. These patterns do not frighten, they merely exist. And as they exist, they teach. You notice how easily people accept limitation when it feels familiar. You notice how comfort can be mistaken for freedom. You notice how subtle repetition can shape identity more profoundly than any dramatic event. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the house begins to teach you these lessons too. It is not coercion, it is reflection, not manipulation,
not threat. It is the quiet power of observation, the subtle authority of accumulated history. The manor has endured because it does not demand compliance. It simply reflects what people already bring to it. And that reflection is enough. You may realize now that leaving would be less a matter of physical movement than of mental shift, because once these patterns have settled into your awareness, they cannot be undone. The manor exists not only in stone and timber, but in thought, in memory, in the habits of restraint that it has preserved so carefully. Its influence spreads outward silently, invisibly, enduring in the very structure of decision-making, in the small pauses before action, in the gentle hesitations that become invisible fences around possibility. The house waits, not for fear, not for noise, not for resistance. It waits for recognition. And once recognized, it continues quietly, persistently, indefinitely. Its lessons are not dramatic. They are not immediate. They are cumulative. They build slowly, inexorably, like the slow accumulation of dust, like the quiet erosion of stone, like the layering of memory over centuries. And as you listen, as you imagine, as you breathe, you carry those lessons with you, whether you wish to or not. The haunted manor does not end. It does not need to. It has outlasted the people who built it, the people who lived in it, and the people who imagined it. It has learned that endurance is more powerful than terror, and that patience is more effective than force. And in that lesson, you sense its quiet inevitability, that some places do not haunt with fear, but with recognition, that some presences persist not through aggression, but through reflection, and that some houses endure because they teach the quietest, slowest, and deepest of all lessons, how to remain unchanged, even as the world moves on.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.